Thomas and Friends has been one of the longest running kids shows, starting in 1984. Originally, it used to use models, but transitioned into CGI in 2008 and 2009. It's really come a long way, and I was glad to be one of the people working on it. I worked for Hit Entertainment as one of the show's writers. I still work for Hit, but no longer work on the actual show, since Mattel has recently bought Hit. They're completely changing the show into something called Thomas and Friends. Big World, Big Adventures, which I'm pretty sure is going to be a total failure. The main reason I stopped working on the show was because my favorite two characters, Edward and Henry, got the boot and were to be replaced by two new female characters, which I hated. Mattel thought it was better this way because the STEAM team was unbalanced in terms of gender. Only one female engine, 6 male. However, I thought this was a horrible idea because Thomas and Friends already had an almost equal audience of male and female viewers, thus rendering the addition of these characters completely pointless, besides benefiting to the plot, which is Thomas going on adventures around the world. With one of the female characters, I guess. Instead of working on the show, I created individual shorts with a group of my favorite coworkers, which are almost often focused on Edward and Henry rather than Thomas. They are aired on TV, but also uploaded to YouTube. Anyway, enough with that. It's time to get to the point of the story. It was March 5th, 2015. The Adventure Begins, my favorite Thomas and Friends special, had just been released on March 3rd. I was proud of myself for helping with it. But that day, I was browsing through a bunch of documents about the show when I discovered one called Thomas and the Unfinished Bridge, Restricted. This got me confused. I kept track of all the Thomas and Friends episodes, and I knew that there wasn't one called Thomas and the Unfinished Bridge. I asked my boss about this document, and he said, "Oh, that?" he asked, seeming slightly concerned. In 1988, an episode was going to be made called Thomas and the Unfinished Bridge, but it was never aired. Why? I asked. Well, it was supposed to be a regular episode, my boss explained, although it wasn't a part of the season, as the last season before the episode was made in 1986, as you know. The episode was supposed to happen like this. Thomas was doing something normal, and his brakes began to fail. He was going towards an unfinished bridge with a bunch of passengers inside a coach. He was pulling. Luckily, Edward saw this and managed to stop Thomas by cowping up to the couch and applying his brakes. Somebody working at the company made a draft of the episode and sent it to the show's main creators in the VHS tape. I think the guy's name was Eric. Then the company noticed some things in the draft, and they fired the person who made it and canceled the entire episode. But why? I wondered. We don't even know. Now, we don't want to either, my boss answered. And what happened to the VHS tape, if I may ask? I told you that the company kept it, but it was stolen by somebody. Nobody knows where it went, he said. This was sort of creepy. I should have ignored this Thomas and the Unfinished Bridge thing, but my curiosity often overpowered me in life. And this was one of those occasions. When I got home that same day, I searched Amazon for anything called Thomas and the Unfinished Bridge. Surprisingly enough, I actually found an old VHS tape with the same name, being sold by an account which had a username of a bunch of random characters, letters, and numbers specifically. I found this odd and thought maybe I should stop there, but my curiosity got the better of me again. I ordered the VHS tape. It took 8 days for the tape to arrive before it finally did on March 13th, Friday the 13th. What an odd coincidence. I connected my VCR to my TV and inserted the tape into the player. What was on the tape began to play. What I saw was way too scary and dark and depressing for a kid's show.
It's a wonderful day on the island of Sugar. Thomas and Annie and Clarabelle were excited to drop the passengers off at the station. Annie and Clarabelle were telling Thomas not to go fast, because otherwise the brakes would break. Clarabelle, Thomas, go slower, remember that you are carrying passengers, Clarabelle explained. But Thomas didn't listen to her and kept going. Further ahead was Bertie the bus warning Thomas that the bridge is broken and there is a detour. Bertie, careful, Thomas, go slowly, said Bertie. But Thomas didn't hear him. He was going at full speed. He was happy. Thomas saw the station and said, "It's the station," Thomas exclaimed happily. The driver put on the brakes, but Thomas kept going. Thomas exclaimed, saying, "Help me, I can't stop." "Help," Thomas said. The signalman saw Thomas going at full speed towards the broken viaduct. The signalman called to Sir Topham Hatt. "Hello, yes, I need Edward. It's an emergency." Thomas' brakes fail and he heads towards the broken viaduct at full speed with the passengers inside. They have to stop as soon as possible before it's too late. Thomas' drivers tried to stop, but the brakes did not respond. "Well, Edward, we have to save Thomas as quickly as possible before it's too late," Edward's driver said. Edward quickly headed towards where Thomas was speeding away. "Wait, Thomas, I'm coming," Edward said. Chase began. Edward was behind Clarabelle, trying to get his driver to connect him with Clarabelle. "Thomas, what are you doing? Stop," said Thomas's driver, but Thomas did not listen to his driver and continued further and further forward very quickly. The passengers and children were screaming in fear. Edward was still chasing Thomas. To rest, but decided not to stop. Further ahead there was a danger warning sign, "Locomotives cannot pass." The machine saw the warning and told Thomas, but Thomas showed no signs of being in danger. Annie and Clarabelle were so scared that they were screaming out of fear, saying, "Thomas, please stop. What are you doing?" Annie and Clarabelle exclaimed. Suddenly, up ahead, the viaduct was already broken. Thomas smiled and laughed, waiting to fall from the viaduct. Edward tried with all his last strength to reach Thomas. But it was too late. "Stop, Thomas, stop," said Edward. Edward went because of the train breakdown, and when he reached the viaduct and looked with his own eyes, he was shocked with terror when he saw what was below the viaduct. In front of him were Thomas and Annie and Clarabelle, unrecognizable when they fell from the impact. Thomas was the only one who was alive. The passengers inside Annie and Clarabelle were left dead and decapitated by the impact. Broken windows and blood on Annie and Clarabelle. They had to get Annie and Clarabelle out of there along with Thomas, and when they put Thomas in the train breakdown, Edward left for the scrapyard to leave Thomas to be scrapped. Thomas couldn't stop laughing when he saw Clarabelle destroyed and unrecognizable until they removed Thomas' face of pain. Edward saw how Thomas was scrapped by removing his wheels and face and backed away slowly saying goodbye to Thomas. Goodbye, Thomas, Edward said sadly.